I live in the Silicon Valley, and I've been an investor of technologies for the past 12 years. And it's my pleasure to be with you today to talk about the influence of technology on how technology changes the rules of the game. For the past 12 years of investment experience, I've seen a number of small technology companies, what the Koreans call venture companies, grow up to be a very, very large companies. In fact, they influence the way we live, the way we play, the way we work. So I'd like to share with that and put some comparisons between Silicon Valley and where we are in Korea. And by the way, you notice that I'm not wearing a tie today. I'm not trying to change the rules. All I have done was to read the emails that were sent out by the organizers to all the speakers who were invited. So those who are still wearing the ties are the ones who did not read the emails. And I happen to read the email. So I'm a follower of the rules that are changing on me. Let me start with an interesting quote. About 100 years old now, everything that can be invented has been invented already. It's spoken by Charles Dole, who was the patent office commissioner in 1899. Apparently, during his tenure at the patent office, he noticed that there are so many things that have been invented. And there, he basically said, everything that we ever need is pretty much invented, so who would need any more invention? Now, fast forward about 110 years, you see so many innovations and technologies and new things around us. Clearly, one page isn't enough to fill. It's a small snapshot. Nuclear technology, jets, semiconductors, microwaves, fax machines, telephones, space travel. These are all examples that we can begin to list. And the important implication of the technology isn't about invention for the heck of invention. It's how those technologies change the way we live and behave. Let's take an example of some of the obvious things that we've done. And these are not the examples from past 100 years, rather past 10 to 15 years. The post office. When was the last time we actually took an envelope, put a postage stamp, and went to the post office to mail something? And instead, we actually go to Hotmail or other Gmail types and to send a quick email to say greetings. Telecom. When was the last time you had to run home to take a phone call? Because our telephones used to be tethered to the wall with a line that came out. And unless you were there to receive the ringing, you couldn't receive the calls. And if you were to make the calls, you had to be there. And now it has changed completely. Anywhere you go, mobile, you can make the phone calls. Anywhere you're connected through Wi-Fi, you can make voice over IP phone calls. The first Hotmail and Skype are our companies, happy to say. If you want to buy and sell something, you don't go to the market necessarily. Instead, you log on to eBay or auction.co.kr to buy stuff. Look at the way our children play. When was the last time our children say, hey, Mom, I'm going outside to find friends at the playground? Instead, they run into their room, log on to Facebook, and start chatting. And that's how they play. When we do research, when was the last time you ran to the library? Instead, you Google first, or 지식인 in neighbor language. Think about the kind of profound changes that technology has brought to date. And let me follow up with another quote. Ray Kurzweil is a well-known futurist, and he said, invention pace in the next 20 years will exceed the past 100 years. And you heard a lot about Moore's law, and he isn't the first one who talked about the compounding rate of innovation. And basically, Ray Kurzweil said, if you figure out the cost of calculation per thousand MIPS, the rate has doubled such a way that by year 2020, the little device that we hold in our hand, whatever that may be, most likely a smartphone, a converged device, would have enough calculational power that our human brains would do. It's not to say those things will replace our human brains, but nonetheless, it's an important implication of the technology. But what's really interesting is the rate of technology isn't good by itself. The technology innovation has got to go fast only if there's a market to adopt it. So we had an example, and back in 1995, a small company called Hotmail, they decided to give away the email client for free. It was a new concept as well. And with the riding waves of the internet, the company was able to acquire 10 million users in a year and a half, 18 months. And it was the kind of rate that was unspoken of. And we were saying, wow, this is the power of technology. And we coined the term viral marketing from there on, which everybody uses. Now, we were saying this kind of rate cannot be topped until we invested in Skype in the early 2000s. Skype was able to acquire 10 million users in less than the time, about 12 months. And we go one step further, and we find Glam, an online, fashion-oriented magazine, was able to acquire same number of users in less than 10 months. So you keep talking about innovation power, but you also have to appreciate the power to adopt the new technology. I'll talk about this a little further, but the fact that we're here today in Korea, Korea is not only an innovator of new technologies, but you'll find that you guys are living the fastest technology adopter market. So it's kudos to you. Now, where do these innovations come from? It's a place that's quite sunny. There's a lot of money. And there's Stanford University, a fine university that generates a lot of MBAs and a lot of engineers. And most importantly, it's a place where failure is valued. If you give a valid try and you fail, you're given a second try again by the investors. And this place is called the Silicon Valley. And who would argue that Silicon Valley isn't a place where all the good names that we all are aware of come from? Intel, Cisco, eBay, Yahoo, Google, Facebook, Apple, but most recently even the technologies in clean tech. Tesla Motors, another one of our companies, they all started in the Silicon Valley, became very, very successful, and probably changed the world in a small way. That means it almost seems as if Silicon Valley has a monopoly on technology and innovations. But let me actually throw out a couple of questions to you. The very question, just to challenge that assumption. The first question says, what do these Silicon Valley companies have in common? These are the companies that you know: Intel, Sun, eBay, WebEx, Google, Yahoo. Perhaps the exception of WebEx, you might have heard of all of them. Anybody can guess what the common theme is? These are all founded by non-Americans. They're not born in the US. They're Hungarians, Indians, Iranians, Chinese, Russians, and Taiwanese. It says something. So far, Silicon Valley was a center of innovation, attracted a lot of people there. So therefore, brains started ideas and started companies and started changing the world. Let me throw out one more. What do these global companies, again, the emphasis on global companies, have in common? CSR, NCSoft, Skype, Baidu, Naver, or NHN rather, and Focus Media. A quick hint is two of the companies are from Korea. They are not Silicon Valley companies. It has happened that the technology is happening more and more away from Silicon Valley, either because of the size of the market or because of the brains, the education systems, or even financial incentives. It's important for us to note that Korea, at least I put two of the Korean companies in that list. And if you look at where Korea is, there's no reason why Korea cannot be a complementary location for for Silicon Valley for innovations. We talked a lot about the innovations that has occurred in Korea today and how it's going to continue to do so. Let me point out the obvious ones: broadband, wireless, TVs, DRAMs, NAND flashes, online games, and search engines. Take the cell phones, for example. Out of more than a billion cell phones manufactured in the world today, over 300 million cell phones are manufactured in Korea. Same thing. As a country, #1 market share for global TVs and displays and DRAMs and NAND flash memories. It's a country where a locally brewed search engine called Naver has a lion's share, 70% of the market, while Google, the global name, only has about 2% market share. It is an interesting country. I don't know where Korea, in terms of IT infrastructure, it's ahead of others because Korea changed the rules or it followed the rules. If you look at this graph, the one on the y-axis, the further you go right, or this way, the more internet penetration you have. The higher you go on the y-axis, the faster you're connected. And clearly you can tell Korea is at the top, one of the highest penetrations, but also one of the fastest connectivity speeds at 30 megabits per second. If you have 30 megabits of download speed, you can do a lot of things. Some of the innovations, they came with Korea's online games. Was possible because Korea is one of the first countries that had broadband connectivity. The kind of success that you see in Korean IT now declared can be translated into other markets. #1, clearly, people, a lot of us, everyone in the globe and in Korea are recognizing the fact that IT market perhaps is maturing, although there are pockets of still rapid growth. What are the next frontiers for business opportunities? And Korea decided, oh, it is clean tech, environmental, renewable energies, and so forth. The good news is that the core competencies, perhaps, that got Korea the kind of success in the IT are the same kind of skill sets that will serve them well in the clean tech. Take a look at solar cell manufacturing, for example. It's a simplified manufacturing process for semiconductors. How easy can it get? If you look at ASICs, application-specific integrated circuits, tons of applications, tons of experiences, and they can certainly be tied to the smart grid of the clean tech. Even existing IT products such as TVs, the backlightings are being replaced with a clean energy, a clean source of energy, or cleaner source of energy called LED. And with the built-in market of such a huge manufacturing base of TVs, Korea finds itself in a driver's seat to help push for such markets in LED. It's already gaining dominance in clean tech, at least in select areas. Hyundai just launched an electric vehicle. LG Chemical, as you know, has a lion's share for the batteries that supply the electric vehicles. So far I talked about the ITs and the potential, the success of IT, Korean IT, and the potential for Korea in the clean tech. But let me pause for a moment and emphasize the importance of people. We talk a lot about technology, but we actually forgot the human factor. I think Dr. Hwang earlier in the morning session talked about it a little bit. As an investor to technology, I am investing in early stage companies only with sometimes handful of people with ideas. I'm not investing in a technology. Rather, I'm investing in people. By the same token, if you think about how the Korea has enjoyed the success in IT to date, and hopefully potentially enjoy the same kind of success in clean tech, you have to look at yourselves as the people of Korea. I pulled this slide from OECD, except for some obscure countries on the left, smaller countries. Korea ranks very, very high, in fact, one of the highest in the world in terms of levels of education. And if you compare to the average OECD countries, which are right in the middle, Korea is way ahead. Korea has 98% literacy rate, greater than 80% of the people, of the high school graduates, go on to get a college education. But as you know, just being smart or being educated doesn't quite cut it. Hardworking, combined with the right kind of education is what it takes to be successful. Successful now and successful later. I know a lot of you are students. You know how difficult it is to be a student in Korea. And a lot of you guys working in the corporate world, especially those at Samsung, LG, and others, how many hours you're working on an average day basis. The total number of hours worked per employee in Korea in 2008, and by the way, this number dropped from 2004. It was even higher. It's 2,250 some odd hours. If you divide that number by 52 weeks of the year, no vacation, no holidays, comes up to be about 44 hours a week. And if you take the average in the US, it comes out to be about 36. And Americans are made fun of by the European friends who say, you guys work too hard because you don't know how to enjoy life. Imagine that. And now if you go down to the bottom of the OECD countries, especially in Europe, their average number of hours per week worked per person is about 26 to 28 hours. The point I'm making here is technology really is about people. It doesn't happen. Remember what Edison used to say, it's not about all brilliance, it's about perspiration. Try every single thing that comes along the way before you find that single innovation. It takes guts, it takes hard work, it takes persistence. And that's what Koreans have done very, very well. Let me make a few observations in terms of changing rules of technology. It's kind of broad, it's kind of random, but I thought I would bring it out to you. I know Todd Bradley earlier talked about HP's business. Let me take a specific example of HP's imaging business. They figured out a way, or they changed the rules of the game of selling a hardware. How do you sell hardware that gets increasingly commoditized? Very hard to make a living, very hard to make high margins when competitors from China, India, elsewhere jump in and low-cut you. They decided to create a really good product, almost give it away. But instead, they wanted to continue generating high-margin businesses by selling ink cartridges. I bought a inkjet cartridge, model number 3800T, for $1,000 about 3-4 years ago. Prints beautiful color pages up to 25 a minute. After about a year, I loved the product. It was inexpensive, high quality. After about a year, I had to replace the cartridges. There aren't only one, there are 4. There's a black ink cartridge, there's a cyan, red, and blue or something. Each one costs about $200. So I paid $800, almost the price of the inkjet printer that I bought, to keep my printer from stop working. But I was glad to do so because it was a great product. So they figured out a way. HP figured out a way, changed the rules the way they do business in selling our hardware. Samsung. Another observation I've made, which I thought was very interesting for Samsung to do. They recently launched Galaxy S, Galaxy Tab, as a competitor to iPhone and iPad. For the first time in history, Samsung had to sell something beyond the hardware. They had to set up a data center in Europe so that they can continue supplying the information that comes through the consumers, through their app stores, the connectivity through Twitters, to Facebooks, and whatnot. And it was a radical departure from the way they used to do business. So now I think it's a good thing for them that they are following the changing rules of the game. I wouldn't say they were the leader, but it's a must. And they're figuring out that perhaps their days of dominating only in hardware may be numbered. So I see this as a great sign, and I see this as an example of changing rules of the game, either adopting it or trying to stay ahead. Maybe this is the first step. We all know iPhone versus Android phone battle today. Apple essentially changed the rules of the game several years ago when they launched iPhone. They integrated software, hardware, the media, everything else that went along with it. And they did such a fine job, so people used to go, wow, I'd like to have that. It was very, very hard to compete for anybody else to come with a piecemeal. Software alone, hardware alone, or selling music alone. But now, iPhone has become such a dominant force, so there's this changing rules of the game. The industry kind of said, we got to do something about it. So the carriers and all the mobile phone manufacturers got together and said, thanks to Google's free software on OS, mobile OS, we can jump on this bandwagon and try to create a balance around it. And all of a sudden, Android phones soon, I believe, is selling more than iPhones altogether. So Apple changed the rules of the game first, then the remainder of the industry players now changed the rules on them. Now it's uncanny that we have to think about what happened to Betamax and VHS many years ago. Now you also have to think about where Apple has been, Mac versus PC in the 80s. Really a very interesting thing to observe. Again, another example of how things play out. Do you lead the change or do you follow nonetheless? If you're not aware of either, you're in big trouble. And then my last observation is the advent of electric vehicles. It's pretty obvious what's going to come. So let's not only talk about the obvious changes that's going to come in terms of changing the rules of the game. If electric vehicles become the mainstay of all of us who's going to buy cars in 10, 20 years from now, you have to think about the implications on the internal combustion engines. You have no idea how much money has been invested in developing those engines. There's a huge exit cost to those players. Now, if you take out the combustible engine, now you get rid of fuel injections carburetor went a long time ago, fuel injections and all the mechanical stuff that went along with it. All of a sudden, you got a huge space in your hood you can do a lot of things with. All of a sudden, you can actually improve the designs of your cars. One of the reasons where all the cars used to look the same was that you had the greatest concept. By the time you design a car, you needed the horsepower. You make the engine a little bigger. You had to. You had no other choice. Then the body shape had to change to fit that. But now, all those things are out the door. One step further is who's a potentially better manufacturer of electric vehicles? Are they the traditional automotive OEMs, like the Ford, the GMs of the world? Or are they the consumer electronics players of today? It's an interesting question. The advent of electric vehicles now creates other kinds of challenges. Let me throw out one more. If electric vehicles becomes a mainstay, all the powers come from the power grids. You have to hook it up at night and charge your cars. But now, if you do so, you have to worry about turning on your heater because it's going to put strain on your electric bills. During hot summer days when you drive, air conditioning, whoa, that's additional cost. And then there's even talk about legislating tinted windows for your cars so that you can cut down the infrared coming into your car. So it's going to heat up, therefore you have to crank up your air conditioning. So these are all implications that happen. You think through, there are enough challenges and the opportunities for you to think through and get ahead of the game. and you can change the rules of the game. Two things I would say. This is my concluding comment, by the way. Korea has been in a great place in the last 20, 30 years. And it's really thanks to the hard work and the commitment of the people, the government, and the conglomerates. In the beginning, Korea was a great follower of the changing rules of the game. Now it's got the challenge and the opportunity to stay ahead of the game and potentially change the rules of the game. And in my mind, being able to think through different scenarios of what's going to happen in the future and preparing it for the changing rules, it's what's going to make you succeed or fail. With that, with a short remark, I thank you for listening. Thank you.